want to start just by finding out, what was it about the field of fertility and reproductive health that drew you in? Because I feel like anytime we get drawn in, we can't, we're sort of a lifer.
Yeah, I think that it's just such a unique place to be. You don't hear about, fertility specialists as far as like therapists are concerned. So
Right.
it's a very kind of narrow space, and there's just not a lot of people in that space. And so that was intriguing. But also, I'm a mom,
Mm,
so being a mom and understanding and really kind of empathizing with motherhood, pregnancy, what that looks
mhm.
like, supporting a lot of women in the just going through fertility, but also women that are helping other families go through the fertility process. And so
Right.
once I had the opportunity, it was just kind of like, oh my gosh, like this just sounds like it would be for me, and it really has been. It's been like a real joy working with
Mm.
this field.
And you probably have saved some relationships along the way, I imagine, because as we hear so often, I'm a single mama, it wasn't the word by choice is a funny one to me because it's not like I spent my adulthood going like, I can't wait to be a single mom. It was never like that. It's just the way that life played out.
Yeah.
And I see the stress on the couple so much. And so, I imagine that if they are willing to take the step and work with you, that not only can you help make sure that the marriage stays intact, but you can actually help them develop all these tools along the way so that the marriage can grow stronger.
Yeah, it's actually much more of a positive experience when
Mm,
you enter into therapy, even before starting, the fertility process, because that's to prepare to learn how to work together to kind of see what this process might entail. And it really does two things because it strengthens your relationship. A lot of couples, they've never
right.
been to therapy before, right? So we have issues outside of fertility that exist, but then to
Sure.
enter into such a stressful time and to go
Mhm.
through that process, if your foundation isn't strong to begin with, it can feel pretty depleting. And so it's a really cool process because it ends up being a great experience for most couples.
I love that. Can you also fill me in? This was something that I was thinking about earlier today. Is what's the difference between a licensed marriage and family therapist and a social worker?
Well, we kind of all like an LCSW. So we can all do therapy. But to do social work, you actually work with the community, and you can do a lot of like work with the community that does services, like you can work in the courts and you can work as a case manager. So I couldn't do that because I am strictly a therapist.
Okay.
But an LCSW can actually, I feel like there's a lot more kind of like a broad and freedom, where you can kind of put your career and touch other people's lives. You can kind of,
Mm,
it's very broad.
okay. I'm seeing some familiar faces here. I wanted to say hi to Rocky, Claude, an endo social worker who's there, glowing as Anna, Nat Massey. I think I saw CL Mayfield too, and Frenchie Jen. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy that you're here. This is, I'll tell you, there's a lot of things that come up in our community around dealing with family members who say the wrong thing, who are downright toxic and unhelpful. And I think there's this big question mark when this happens where we say, what's the healthiest thing? Is the healthiest thing to remove those people from my life? But you're thinking about bringing this baby into the world and you want them to have a lot of family. So are you being, I think we question ourselves, am I being selfish by asking for distance or just taking distance? How do you
Mm-hmm.
approach that?
And I know that we did touch on this last time because this seemed to be a very popular topic, was
Mm,
boundaries.
yeah.
And as we know, going through, just growing up in your own family, every family has its issues, and most families actually don't have great boundaries at all.
It's
For
so
some
true.
reason, we just think that we can trample all over each other just because you're my sister or my
Right.
mother or my brother or whatever. And that's not at all healthy.
Hmm.
That's kind of one of those toxic traits that a lot of families have come to understand because that's generational, and that just kind of goes with every generation. That's what we're taught. So it's very, very important to practice boundaries as an adult anyway. So to learn how to have boundaries so that we can teach our kids how to have boundaries. It's very important, especially in this day and age. We hear about it all the time, how people can be taken advantage of. But when it comes to fertility, it's really important to keep your circle healthy. And if that means having boundaries with family members, even for the time being through the process, that's a really important thing. And it's okay to give yourself permission to have those boundaries and to have those hard conversations. And it doesn't mean they're going to be received well. It just means that I'm going to protect the world that I'm kind of creating for myself to go through this process.
That's part of the hardest thing. It might not go well. And if you are conflict averse, or if you're uncomfortable with, someone not liking you, I think those conversations can be really difficult.
Very, very difficult. And I think that's where we do a lot of self-exploration. And I always encourage anyone going through this process to seek therapy before, educate yourself on what this might look like and what this could feel like, and what are your family dynamics now? What does support look like now for you? Because we may really need to dig into what's going on for you individually, or even as a couple with your families, and how they merge and how they interact, and then how you're going to move forward through such a difficult process, because it's already difficult here. It shouldn't have to be increasingly difficult on the outside, right? We need that support. So it's really important to get that help and to learn about ourselves and how we communicate. And it's okay if somebody else isn't accepting, because that's not really our business. That's theirs.
I love how you speak. And I said this on the last time too, that, 5 minutes into a conversation with you and I already feel calmer. I feel like I need to keep you on my shoulder and just to have you as like a recording, like reminding me of these things. I think one thing that would be really helpful if you're game, and we didn't talk about this in advance, so it's okay for you to say no. See, that would be inviting you to have a boundary.
Thank you.
We role play a boundary?
Sure.
Can I be, like how I know some of our users have experience and some of our community members have experienced life. And if I'm just being them, I want to hear how you would set a boundary. Because I think boundary is like an esoteric term.
Sure.
And it's invisible, but it usually means we have to use our words.
Absolutely. So am I going to be, am I the person going through the process, or who am I?
You're the patient and I'm going to be the toxic family member.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm texting you, and I just texted you, has your doctor even cleared you to have a baby? It seems like with everything going on, you're not fit to be a mother.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, I would probably text you back, and, or maybe I wouldn't, honestly. Maybe I wouldn't even text you back. I'd probably have to process what that feels like for me and what I want to convey to you. And so what I would want to convey to you first off is that if you, those are not words that are actually encouraging for me. And if those are your thoughts and feelings about what I'm going through, I'm going to actually kindly ask you not to have any more communication in regards to my fertility process right now. That I appreciate your concern. I'm sure your intentions are great and they're good, and I know that you love me. But I am going to kindly ask you not to speak to me about my fertility process until I'm ready to talk about it, and maybe until you're ready to be more supportive.
That's great. That's beautiful. And I noticed the first boundary you said is actually not texting back right away.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I think people get into this instant, it's almost like the reverse of gratification, but it is a bit of a gratification. Like they get into this instant communication. And so people stop listening to each other. Right. And all they're doing is kind of like spewing. They're like yelling at each other through text. And so probably the first healthiest thing I noticed you did was, I'm not going to text back.
Yeah.
And
anger, right? I got angry hearing that upset me. And so I'm probably not going to say anything very productive out of anger. Not that I don't do it. I'm human. But I think that in this sense, it would be, if we're practicing boundaries, and we have been practicing our boundaries, it would be very smart to stop and probably consult our partner, our loved ones, the people that do support us, and talk about this and say, this really, really hurt me, and I'm not willing to invite that into my space right now. And so I need to communicate that with this person when I'm ready, but maybe right now is not the time.
Oh my gosh, are you guys writing this down? Okay, I love the language that you just used. I think I'm going to transcribe this and then start circulating the transcription. That was so well said. I'm not inviting that into my space right now. It's so powerful.
Yeah, we just have a lot of energy that we use and we don't use it very wisely. You know, it's like we only have so much energy. So let's not use it on the people that are just going to be toxic.
Yes, exactly. Now, on the flip side of that, so that might be me as the woman in this scenario getting really dark, toxic communication from a family member. And what am I expecting what is realistic and healthy to expect my partner to do when I've been hurt and wronged by a family member? Because if it's a, whether it's a male partner or a female partner, I think the partner is going to want to pounce and be productive and also be angry. Or it's a very passive person who's like, don't say anything. Let's not rock the boat, blah, blah, blah. But what do I have a right to expect of my partner? What would be a healthy ask of my partner in that scenario?
Well, it's two-sided because even as a partner, it's like, how am I supposed to react to that? Right. And then as the person, what am I supposed to ask from my partner? And I think that communication, it's very important to have open communication when it comes to those topics, especially when they're so sensitive. And so as your partner, I would say, wow, let me validate you. So I'd validate you and say, that's not okay. That is extremely hurtful. I can't imagine how you felt hearing that. What do you need from me? What can I do to support you? Because I could also explain to you and have you understand that I kind of want to fly off the rails right now. I kind of want to call them up and say, how dare you? But that's not necessarily helpful. So what do you need from me right now? Do we need to process this? Do we need to talk to our therapist? And as the person receiving that, really let your partner know what you do need. So if that's just, I just need you to listen to me right now. I'm just so upset. And maybe we'll come to we'll have, more of like a plan when I've processed all of this and kind of come down from it. But I think we talked about this before too, is sleeping on it is always great. So when we can talk
if you can sleep, sometimes it's bothering you and it's just like ruminating, right? Yeah. Happened to me last week. There was something that came up and I couldn't sleep. So I had to like write all my thoughts and feelings down so I could actually get to sleep.
Exactly. And that's what you should do is you need to get those things out. So if that's talking to somebody that loves you and supports you, if that's writing it down, but giving yourself time and not rushing to react, because when we rush to react, we don't know, we're not always in a good space. And then we may regret things, or we may just feel like, why did I even stoop down to that? And I wasted some really good energy that I had that day.
Kind of like Michelle Obama's like, we go high.
Exactly.
I like that approach.
Yeah. And I think it sometimes it sounds silly, but it's really just, it's being kind to yourself. And we just don't do it enough. We think we have to react right away to show some type of strength. But honestly, even staying quiet or just not giving that energy to the person is very strong. It's actually harder to do.
Is ghosting somebody trying to set a boundary in an emotionally immature manner? Or is it a boundary?
So it's so funny. I hate the term ghosting because I hate ghosting. So I think that it is one of those things where, yes, it can seem immature, but that's more or less if it's right out the gate. If this is the first time you've ever approached me about this, and I feel in my heart that your intentions are actually probably somewhere good, and maybe you're just a little ignorant and you're not really educated in what I'm going through, I personally would give the opportunity to educate you. And I would be okay with saying, so I'm just going to, kind of open this up for you and give you clarity. What you said was not okay. And that didn't feel good. And so if you do want to learn about my process, I can definitely do that, but I'm going to need you to be respectful and all that. Now, if this is a continued pattern and this person does not, hasn't taken that into consideration, is just being mean-spirited, I think there's nothing wrong with walking away from that because you've already said how you feel. And that person may very well understand that. And you can always say again, I'm actually no longer going to have a relationship with you and we will not be speaking anymore. And that's not giving them a choice. That's not asking. That's just saying this is what it is.
Right. Which is more communication actually than the scenario that I'm thinking about with one of our community members. The family member said something horrible in text and then ghosted our community member. So I felt like that was like a double toxic moment, where it's like how
that's hurtful.
Really, really hurtful. And so the question is, so when the person then gets back in touch finally, they don't think they did anything wrong. They think it's perfectly fine that they dismiss your love and your desire and your longing to have a child, and reiterated that they think it's impossible for you to have success, that somehow you're not deserving of the outcome that you seek.
Well, in that sense, being ghosted and then having somebody come back into your life and try to maybe explain that, I really think that's like a personal, and depending on how close they are. For me, I probably wouldn't welcome that back into my life, because you've shown me who you are now. I mean, this is how you are when I'm going through a hard time, and that's super hurtful. And like you said, to say the hurtful words and then to just disappear.
Right.
So it's like a double whammy. I probably would remove myself from that situation completely and really focus on myself. And if one day I wanted to come back and reconcile that, I think that would take a lot of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. My mom didn't speak to me while I was pregnant. And she showed up for the birth of my child 3 days before I was going in for either, to induce or to have a C-section. Wow. And I was shocked because my dad was my birth coach. And I was so shocked when he was like, so your mom's going to be here in a couple days. And I was like, what? She didn't talk to me. She was mad at me for something. And she has, that's her pattern, like throughout my adult life. It's like she gets mad at me for something and stops talking to me. And I won't even know what she decided to be mad about. Yeah. She won't ever communicate about it. But I had that really awakening moment, where it's like, okay, I can either make this really stressful on me, or I can make this an opportunity for Dante. And I decided to make it an opportunity for him, to the point. And I truly, to this day, I'm so proud of myself that I had enough healing and enough therapy in my life that I somehow found the strength to insist that she was also in the delivery room with my dad. Wow. And she, at first she was a little bit martyrish about it, maybe that's not a fair term, but she was like, no, you picked your dad to be your birth coach, not me, and it was like, okay, that's a little bit of a ding, and I get it. You're still hurt about that, but no, I insist you should both be there. And it ended up being such a beautiful experience to have them both there to witness the birth of my son, because I am a single mom and don't have, a partner that could be there with me. And what a unique experience for them. They had the experience of their own children, but they never got to bear witness to their grandchildren being born. And I have, some of the first earliest photos of my son get to be with his grandparents. And he does have a really unique bond with them because of it.
Yeah. And what you did is you gave your son a gift. And as much as you probably got from it as well, I think that you empathized with your mom, and you were becoming a mom yourself. And so you saw a moment in time, right? That was literally going to last forever. This is a moment nobody can get back.
Right.
You can't do it over.
It's permanent.
Right. But we can reconcile. And so to take our anger, or to do something, where we maybe isolate her, and then one day we might regret that. And right. So to give your son that gift, I think is really, it's so selfless, and that really does show your healing, your strength, and how far you've come, where I'm not going to let, all of this affect me. I'm actually going to continue to be kind of like centered and enjoy my experience. Don't let something like that, ruin or rain on your parade and your experience. You'll never get it back.
Doesn't everybody want to work with Allison? I feel like I'm getting therapized in front of everybody. It's great. I love it. Thank you, Rocky. Thank you, Zucchini. Oh my gosh. There was another moment. Sometimes when you set boundaries, they don't come out all that loving, Allison, right? Yeah. Like, I think we need practice at it. And that's why sleeping on it, writing out what you want to say. There was a moment, there were a couple moments, like early days in my parenting, where I had to set a very forceful, I didn't have to, it came out forceful. I should reiterate. I should restate that. It came out incredibly forceful with my parents. And I didn't mean for the boundary to come out that forceful. And then I felt bad about the delivery mechanism, but I didn't feel bad about the words. Mm-hmm. And so then I had to kind of clean up later. Like, I meant every single word that I said, but I said it like it was a fire hydrant. And I want to make sure that you heard what I said, because like it came out with such force that I was worried that they didn't really get the message,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, and we can
sometimes that
react to
happens.
that. Well, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that delivery is super important. I'm a big proponent and advocate of the way we talk to people. It's the way we feel about ourselves sometimes. So when we're really frustrated with ourselves and what we're going
Mm,
through, and kind of feel like we're, you know, at our wits' end and things come off, it's more of a reflection of what we're going through. But what I say can still stick, and what I say still has the same intent and the same meaning. It's the way it came out. And so I always think
mm,
that it's so great to own your stuff. Own, when we mess up, because what that
right.
does, it gives space and it validates like your parents, if that's what it was, because then they feel like,
Hmm.
okay, well, she's at least admitting that that wasn't the right way to say it,
Sure.
but she still means what she says, and we need to think about that, and we need to talk about that. And so to continue to deliver it in a way that is maybe respectful and not, very, very heated, or what it may be, that's more effective. Because what I'm saying to
Hmm.
you, what I'm saying to you, only can listen to my words when I'm saying it in
Right.
an effective delivery.
So if
So
you're really angry, how do you do that? Can you role play a moment that you're really angry? Like you're angry at that person who just said, like, I hate to tell it to you, but somebody with that many losses, you're probably not going to get pregnant.
yeah, and if I were to react to that and I was really, really angry, I would probably say, I'm so angry right now at the words that you just said. Nothing I say is going to
Uh,
justify and make any of this
mhm.
right. It's actually, we're going to end up probably having a very heated argument. We may never even speak again. So I'm going to give myself time
Right.
to not do that. But if I just went off on the person,
Yeah. It
um,
would end in nowhere.
yeah, I'd
Nowhere
probably go
good.
with that, because then I'd feel like, oh, I could have said this and I could have said that, and maybe, and I wouldn't have, because we were so hard on ourselves, and how
Right.
that's not how we want somebody talking to us. So it's almost like I stooped to their level
Hmm.
and I just fed it back to them.
So I love that, because if I was going to name that strategy, I would say it's the thing that we teach our kids, which is name your feelings first.
Hmm.
I'm
Right.
feeling really angry by what you just said. So I'm going to walk away right now so I can kind of work it out on that made me so angry, or why that hurt my feelings so much.
Right.
We tell our kids to do that, but I feel like we as adults are out of practice with it, because we're somehow not allowed to have anger, not allowed to be upset, or God forbid we cry in front of somebody.
Right. And as adults, when especially raising kids, we can feel entitled sometimes to having big feelings and having big reactions,
Sure.
because we've gone through this process, and I am frustrated, and you don't know what I've been through. And so I
Hmm.
can feel sometimes like, you know what? I deserve to go off. I deserve to
Hmm.
blow up. And not that you don't deserve to express. It's how we express. It's the
Hmm.
method of expression that is
It can be
so, so
really
important.
damaging, because it
It
can
can be
create a
very
scary
damaging.
environment. It can.
Hmm.
It can create a really scary environment, and that's not what you want in any relationship. And maybe all of us could approach it like practice. Like when we're going through this very stressful time and we're met with people who say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, we can kind of use it as practice for parenting, and
Yep.
maybe just frame it like that. Like, okay, I'm really challenged in this moment. I'm going to be challenged when my kid is too, because it does two, in a way, it does two things. In a way, you're visualizing the future of having a 2 or 3 or 4 year old throwing a temper tantrum, saying really horrible things to you, because kids do that sometimes. They say the hate you, and they do all the, don't talk to me for the rest of the day. And it's like, where the heck did that come
Right.
from? And they're
Yeah.
going to change their mind in 5 minutes. Like as soon as that storm passes, they're going to change their mind anyway. And we
Yeah.
could practice, like, I think, staying calm in the eye of the storm.
Yeah. And I think that, parenting is very, very humbling. And so,
Very.
right. So it's like, you really have to drop that ego for much of the years of parenting, and kind of these are people too. And we're not here to actually control them. We're just here to guide them. And
Yeah.
so teaching by modeling behavior is really important. So if you can start with the people that actually give you that kind of, which is so sad, because a lot of adults do act like toddlers.
Oh,
and
yeah.
have, those temper tantrums.
And feel entitled to say whatever they want to say in however manner they want to say it.
Right.
And it is just so hard. So I want to ask the community, what questions do you have for Alison? This is your chance to connect one-on-one with a therapist. Well, more like 20-on-1 with a therapist, but she's amazing. And yes, Dante, in probably 20 minutes. He comes in and he whispers, but it's like, but I have to talk, fool.
Right. You're like, I have to talk to you.
Yeah. I think everybody's used to Dante interrupting at this point. Yeah, I want to throw it out to everybody that's listening. What questions do you have? I think one of the questions I have too, Alison, that comes up a lot is if you have a partner who's super resistant to starting therapy or going to therapy, what could this group of women on this live communicate to their partner about the first session with you so that it diffuses their fear or diffuses their bravado or diffuses their ego, really?
Yeah. What I always tell any hesitant partner or even just somebody who feels like they have to come to therapy is that I'm just here to have a conversation. I'm basically a friend that you've never met. And I'm the best type of friend because I'm not going to go around, telling your business to anybody. But what I can do is give you some great feedback. And if you want any guidance, I can do that. And in a partnership, I think it's really important that we express to our partner that mental health and having a space for us as a couple to go through this is just as important as us showing up to a clinic together to get tests run. We are in this together. And this is just another piece of our journey to actually make sure that our foundation stays as stable as it can be. And so communicating that, as much as we need to show up to all of our appointments and we need to make sure that we're, doing the medications and things like that. This is another, right. I don't want to say a maintenance program, but it's self-care. It's self-care. It's something to make sure that we're solid. And it's probably the most important part of the process because it also is going to help keep you physically calmer. Right? We're going to learn tools and techniques to stay calmer, and that can really help you through getting through your journey with your partner. So I would just say that, it's a team effort and nothing should be we need to see what each other needs and communicate that. Communication is key.
So what if somebody says, but we never fight?
Oh, I love that because if you don't fight, it's not. If you're not fighting, I hope you're talking.
Right.
So when we're not, I hear that all the time. Like it's so great. We don't even argue. We don't fight. And I said, what do you talk about?
Exactly.
How do you challenge each other, and what do you learn from each other? Because we are in these relationships to really learn from each other and challenge views and be there to support one another. But if you're not arguing, I hope you're talking. And if you're not talking, we have a problem. And so that may be the issue right there. If we don't even fight, well, maybe there's some things we need to talk about. Yeah.
What if somebody says like, oh, that doesn't work. I don't want to talk about my feelings.
Yeah. And I say, and the fact that you don't want to talk about your feelings is let's talk about where that energy goes. I think we talked about this last time, is that every single thing is created by energy. And so if it's a negative emotion, a positive emotion. So if it's a negative emotion, where does it go? Do you go to the gym to work it out? Do you communicate with your partner? How is this being exchanged? So where does it go? Usually it's being stuffed. And I'll say things like, do you ever find yourself getting angry and maybe
or do you drink too much? Are you drinking too much at the end of the day? Like what are you trying to numb at the end of the day?
Where does that energy go? It goes somewhere. And so typically we'll find, yes. And that's like where you kind of find those symptoms of, okay. So, or, you may argue a lot. We argue, but I just don't think this would be helpful because we already talk a lot and we get nowhere. That's what I hear. We already argue and fight and we get nowhere. Right. And it's because there's a lack of understanding there. We can't even be in a space where we can share how we feel because we're angry.
Mediated, facilitated conversations are the best ones to have. They're the safest.
They are. They're so helpful, but just getting there can be really difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, it can. Sure. What does that first conversation look like?
So with me, it's a very easygoing. It's kind of like me telling you who I am, and I love to hear about, the couple that I'm sitting with, and kind of get background. And then I always ask, like, so what brought you here? What made you guys finally decide? Because I think people can say, oh, well, we're here to talk about our fertility journey. Well, what was the breaking point to where it's like, we have to get therapy? That's what I want to know. I want to know, what was that tipping point? Because that's that present. That's the thing that exists right now in the room with you. That's what's in the room with you right at that moment. And that's probably the biggest thing that we want to work on first and tackle before, maybe starting with everything else, is what brought you here.
And what if you have somebody flippant in front of you who says, well, she gave me an ultimatum and said that she didn't want to be married to me unless I came to therapy with her?
I'll usually say, well, do you want to be married to her?
Oh.
And I want to know what that sounds like. It's a very, I typically will throw those types of things back on the client, because you got to own what you're saying. And that's how we self-understand. So I'm not doing anything. I might be helping you understand yourself, but the couple is really, they're the experts of their lives. And so to throw that back and say, well, do you want to be here? Do you want to be married? Why? And it starts a conversation that they've just never had before.
Oh, that's amazing. So you get a lot of self-awareness just in the first visit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Probably some big popcorn pops of like, wow, I didn't know that about myself. Yeah.
And sometimes you don't feel great leaving. Sometimes you're like, wow, we have a lot of work to do, but you feel hopeful, and
good. Yeah. I think, if I was going to list kind of the strategies down for practice, if you will, that probably one of the most empowering things that our community can take away from my conversations with you, Allison, is really practicing setting boundaries, and maybe just noticing from the past week where you maybe didn't set a boundary.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And
really, I think the problems, maybe patterns that come back up time and time again, couples are constantly saying, it's always this, we're always fighting about this. And it's like, we need to tackle the pattern and why this keeps coming back up and why it's not reconciled and what's going on there. And, just kind of diving into what is currently happening in a relationship to cause friction, or, and there's a lot of couples that come to therapy that they have such a harmonious relationship because of therapy.
Okay.
But when I can't be there, what do you do? If I can't be there to facilitate this conversation every day, it's frustrating to feel like you can't talk to your partner for another week because you don't have the therapist. Right. And so, what I do is I actually assign most of my couples to do check-ins at night, at least maybe 3 to 4 times a week. And you just check in with your partner before bed.
That's great.
And you talk about, where are we at? How are you feeling about us? And like, how are you feeling about the progress we've made? And what's frustrating you right now? And just having a real sense of understanding, and not doing it when it's a blow up, but doing it when we're just calm and we can kind of receive it.
Do you also see sometimes through therapy couples that figure out that they probably shouldn't have gotten married in the first place?
Yeah. I've had couples where they're actually there to try to see if there's something that they can make work, and they've chosen not to. And you can actually counsel them. What did Gwyneth Paltrow call it? Conscious uncoupling.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can actually counsel them on how to effectively uncouple or separate, especially if there's children involved or if there's embryos involved.
Yeah, that's one of the harder things, right, in our community, is when there's embryos involved.
Yeah. And so it's a gut-wrenching process, but when both of the parties are mindful that this is the healthiest thing to do, and we need to do this in order to be as mentally healthy as possible, that does happen. And then we have couples that come through who are ready to divorce and end up back together and happier than they could have imagined, because they went through such an incredibly tough process and
together
the other side.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the trauma a little bit and kind of dealing with trauma, coping with trauma, because I think that it is so overlooked just societally how traumatic going through infertility is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first thing that I'd like to understand is the impact of trauma. What do we deal with in the aftermath of trauma?
Well, we deal with a lot of, we're triggered a lot.
Mm.
So we can call it PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
We can call it trauma. And, it shows itself in a lot of different ways. A lot of anxiety
Mm-hmm.
can come up. And if we've experienced loss,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many ways that we are re-triggered and so incredibly fearful. And so to be
Right.
fearful, to feel depressed, to feel anxious, to have real reactions to triggers because we're so scared this is going to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very real. And it's something that especially if it's a couple, I always encourage the couple to get their individual therapy done as well. Because we never can understand 100% what somebody's been through,
of course,
or is going through. And so especially if there's a man and woman involved and a woman has experienced any type of loss, there is an incredible amount of loneliness there, and we hear all the time, well, you're not alone. This has happened to so many women. I feel very alone, and I could feel just really alone in my relationship because nobody can understand really what I went through. And so to really have that validation and that understanding, it doesn't necessarily take that pain away altogether, but having a sense of understanding really is healing, and it's self-healing, and it allows a space where you can heal one another just by being there and giving that space for understanding.
It's really important. I'm remembering some women who finally had the baby in their arms, and they said to me, why don't I feel happier? It took me 10 years to get here, and I thought I'd feel so much joy. But it was 10 years of trauma. And I don't know how they could expect to feel elated joy if they haven't dealt with the 10 years of trauma.
Right. And that's what I would say is, what have we been doing in those 10 years to take care of ourselves?
Right.
Because we can be very hyper-focused on the end goal. And I think we all can relate to that in life. It's not about the destination. If the journey doesn't have to be easy, but I don't understand why it's not working. I'm doing everything right, and I don't understand why I'm not getting my happy ending. And there's just most people around me are.
That's
and
what
it's
it seems like. Sure.
Defeating. Yes. Yeah. And so to understand your journey as you're going through it, honestly, it just changes your whole perspective on life in general, but you're able to have that sense of understanding. And it doesn't mean it fixes anything. It just means that I can move through my journey honestly, and I don't feel like I have to hyper focus on this end goal, because like you said, what happens when I get it? How will I feel? I don't know. We don't know. Some people feel complete, and some feel the complete opposite of that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's very surprising to the person, because they're like, but this is everything that I wanted. And there's a little bit of detachment because of how much trauma went into producing the exact thing that they wanted. So they're often very, very surprised by that. I remember in first trimester, I had a very difficult trimester. And, I had just been pumped up full of all the hormones and everything else. And I was still being pumped full of the hormones to maintain the pregnancy. And I remember someone saying to me, an older mentor of mine, an older gentleman, not that that matters, because I think that this happens, like it's not gender specific. And I remember him saying, well, this is what you wanted. Because I was like lamenting, I feel so sick. I feel so bad. I'm so shocked at how tired I am, blah, blah, blah. And I was just acknowledging where I was, because he asked me, how are you feeling? So I told him the truth. And then his attitude about it was so negating, like, well, this is what you wanted, so like, be careful what you wish for, I guess, kind of an attitude. And I thought, well, just because I wanted it this bad, I didn't say that I wanted to be suffering in the process. I'm like really happy to be pregnant still. It doesn't change how happy I am about being pregnant. but
And
it
I
was
think that's it. Yeah. That's what it is. It's like we can have this and that. We can feel
at the
this and
same
that.
moment.
Right. It's not this or that all the time. And
Right.
so we can all be extremely happy with being pregnant, but it's also, like you said, you're also dealing with the trauma on how hard it was
Yes.
to get here.
Yes.
And then now experiencing what I'm experiencing, you deserve to say, my gosh, that has to be so hard. You know,
Right.
is there anything I can do to help you? You know, you may have a rough few months of morning sickness, or
Right.
like you said, the hormones, you may feel really irritable. And it's like, just because this is what you wanted doesn't take away, you know, that you asked to be sick, or you asked
Right.
to
Exactly.
be hormonal and all those things. You're actually
Right.
experiencing the same thing as many women out there. And it's just,
Right.
yes, you deserve to be validated. And when people are invalidating, oh my gosh, it's like they're just stealing something from us. And it's just anger provoking.
No, you won't be done.
It is. Our timekeeper. April, yes, I'm going to do another embryo transfer. So April's just asking if I'm trying to get pregnant now. So for those of you who don't know my complete story, 14 years ago, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I preserved my fertility and I created 14 embryos with an anonymous sperm donor, and I created 11 unfertilized eggs. So since I'm still single all these years later, I have my one son, Dante, who was a frozen day 2 embryo for 5 years. And hopefully soon enough anyway, he'll have a brother that we can claim has been a day 5 frozen embryo for close to 9 years. So it's crazy. And I just love science, and I love how amazing it is that I know that I get to do round 2.
That's amazing.
So it is amazing. It is amazing. And there were definitely some tough conversations, y'all, with my parents about that, because I'm a single mom one time over already. And they're like, do you really want to do it? You know, plus I'm a startup CEO, and I just bought a small farm in Northern Idaho. So I'm going to have all these farm animals, but the busy people get more stuff done, right? Isn't that the truth, Allison? So I'm just going to make
as long as you're happy. That's the thing, is as long as you're happy. And I think that's what we miss is, happiness. It can feel like something like you're never going to obtain, but it's like this, if you're happy and you've got all this going on, that you can't ask for anything more.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
No. And I think that joy is contagious.
It really is.
Right.
Yeah. And I hope that you have that support in your life, and that, it sounds like you've been through this one time. So hopefully people understand how to support you in the best possible way for the second time.
Well, you know what didn't exist the first time around? Postmates.
Oh my gosh. I know, right?
I mean, I think about being a single mom now, and I'm like, this is going to be a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Because it's delivery. It's the truth. It's just, I didn't have any of that. The first time around.
True. Yeah. Well, good. See, the world is blessing you over again. And
yes, exactly. Thank you, Silicon Valley, for all the tech innovations in the last 7 years. Oh, thanks, Melissa. She's just saying that it's beautiful that I'm giving my son a sibling. Yeah, it was, it took me a while to get here, where I felt confident in his age and where he's at, that I could run to the bathroom and have him just keep an eye on the baby.
Right. Yeah.
But I think we're in a good place to do it. Yeah. So is there anything anybody who's listening wants to ask Allison, anything that you're dealing with, that you're coping with, that you want a tip or two, or just want to be pointed in the right direction? Are you all getting the emotional support that you need with everything that you're dealing with? Is your family being supportive? Is your partner, if you have one, being supportive? I think, we just want to make sure that we have a blanket of love and an emotional support around our community. I wish I had a big old blanket that just had I'm going to make that maybe a big blanket that has all of our hands linking together.
love
all of our
that.
beautiful faces. Well,
Yeah.
Allison, I love these conversations. I do feel like I'm getting therapy in front of everyone every time we talk, and I'm completely open to that because I walk away in a very grounded place.
Yes.
So I hope we get to have you on again, and just thank you so much for how giving you are with our infertility/fertility community. Sometimes I don't like using the word infertility because I feel like we can get the outcome that we want, and it's sometimes demoralizing actually identifying with that word.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Well, I just absolutely love these conversations, and thank you too for being so transparent so we can talk about, the hard things and the hard circumstances and experiences even you've gone through. So I really appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, none of us are without them, right? So
Right.
we can't grow unless we're open about it all.
Exactly.
Yeah. I could do this every day.
I know.
All right, Allison, go enjoy your family. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us today.
Bye, everybody.